Hello, folks, and welcome back to another JS Drop from This Dot. In this drop, we are joined by Josefine Schaefer, who will be talking about Svelte and how its powerful features can help you promote accessibility in your web technologies. Like and subscribe for more informative JavaScript content. Let's get started.
Hi everybody, I'm so excited that today we're talking about accessibility and all things Svelte. My name is Josephine and let's dive right in. So if you stumbled across this abbreviation on the first slide, the A11y, and maybe didn't know what that meant, that is short for accessibility and sometimes pronounced ally, I guess. So the 11 is the 11 letters between the A and the Y. Really quickly before we dive in, my name's Josephine. I'm Developer Relations Engineer at Storyblok. I'm also a Girl Code Ambassador, Svelte enthusiast, and accessibility advocate. So I guess you could say today I'm going to be talking about two of my passions, accessibility and Svelte. So I'm going to be covering the basics of web accessibility, what the entire hype of Svelte is about, and why it's set to be accessibility first. And we're also going to have a look at some of the tools that you can use to bridge the gap between what these accessibility first features might cover and what not. So let's get started with a bit of web accessibility and why it's important. Web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and implemented in a way that people with disability can use them and participate equally on the web. It's also a basic human right as defined by the United Nations. If you're wondering if accessibility is something for you or maybe the people who you want to use your product or your website, I have a number for you. So there was a report by the World Health Organization on disability, and they found that over 15% of the population worldwide experiences some form of disability. And that's over 1 billion people. And while, of course, experiences of disability and global data are both really hard to measure, even if it's just a ballpark, in my opinion, that's a really, really big one. And also, as a society, we are growing older, so that number is only going to go up. And I'm hoping that even if you are looking at this from a business perspective, the sheer amount of people and their spending power convinces you that this is really relevant also for you. And if that's not enough, this table shows some of the many potential uses. So we have different people with disabilities or impairments like physical, auditory, cognitive, neurological, speech, or visual disabilities. And we also can see people without disabilities here. So for example, in this table, they're talking about temporary disability or situational limitations. So that could be a broken arm, or maybe you lost your glasses. And situational would be, well, maybe you're in bright sunlight or in an environment where you can't turn up the sound. Maybe you have a slow internet connection. And all of these are cases in which web accessibility is super beneficial. In practice, that can mean things like providing transcripts or captions for video. It can mean offering different input methods like mouse, keyboard, and speech commands, being open to assistive technology, or explaining unfamiliar terms and not assuming that everybody has the same base knowledge. So very roughly, that was our dive into accessibility, and now we can have a look at Svelte. I already teased that Svelte is already a bit of a hype. It's very, very popular. There was a Stack Overflow questionnaire, I think, that found that Svelte currently is the most loved framework, or it was in 2021. There was also the State of JS questionnaire finding something similar, like most interesting or most satisfying. And it's a relatively young compiler. It was created by Rich Harris and is maintained by him and his core team. It's fully open source. As I said, very popular and basically generates highly optimized and minimal JavaScript. So it's also very performant. There's also Svelte, which was in beta for a long time and now just came out with a release candidate as of recording this. And Svelte is basically the app framework for Svelte, like Next.js is for React. And it is said to be accessibility first, and we're going to have a closer look at what that means. So there are compiler warnings in Svelte that give you these accessibility tips, basically, if you, for example, forget to add an alt attribute to an image element. And there are a number of these warnings in place that check at compile time for some of these issues, mainly on individual components. So, for example, we have a warning if we try to use autofocus, because we shouldn't try to direct the focus point forcefully, especially if you're using assistive technology. That might be really confusing to the user. We get a warning if we are trying to add a positive tab index, because that will change the tab order, and we should try to stick to a natural tab order as much as possible, again, also to avoid confusion. We will get warnings about required attributes. So I already mentioned the alternative text for images, but it also applies for captions on video track elements, for example, the language attribute in the HTML tag, or hrefs and links. And it also checks for some very basic semantic structures. So like if a fig caption is a direct child of a figure element. The full list can be found in the documentation. This was really just a very brief overview, and these warnings are pretty great. It's really cool to have all these checks, especially considering that Svelte is still relatively new framework, and it's also a great attitude, I think, to have this just out of the box. But there are also some things that the compiler warnings are missing, right? So anything that requires a larger overview beyond the individual components or very small structures, hierarchies, or for the headlines, for example, the layout of the page, including the different landmarks, the overall tab order, page flow, if keyboard navigation is possible and enjoyable, or visual things like color contrast. So I want to show you some tools that can help you take it beyond these issues and try to fix them or find out about them. And I'm just going to mention some tools here. I have no affiliation with them, and I'm always happy to learn about new tools. So please feel free to reach out and let me know if you have a favorite tool. And I'm just going to switch over to the browser here. And so the first thing I would do is use a more general tool, like, for example, the XDev tool. So this is an extensive dev code toolkit. I'm just going to scan the entire page. It's by DQ University, and it's scanning my entire page for accessibility issues, and you get an overview. And now, at first glance, 97 issues might seem a bit intimidating, but you can see here, so first of all, a couple of them need a review, so maybe there's something that needs to be checked here. And if we have a look at what these issues actually are, it's a lot of the same issues, and so this might be a relatively straightforward fix, or maybe an easy explanation to why this is. So we can see, for example, here, alternative text of images should not be repeated as text. We can have a closer look here. I can also get more information, for example, if I want to learn why this is important and how I can fix this. And they're also guiding us to inspect the specific issues in the code, for example. So this is a really helpful tool to figure out like a general overview and get guided basically through making an overview of what you could improve on your site. Can close this up. Another more general tool is the Web Disability Simulator. So this gives me an impression of what different people might experience my site like. So I can, for example, select here total colorblindness simulation, and it's gonna change the outlook on the site to colorblind, right? And of course, this is not 100% accurate and represents the experience that people have necessarily for everybody the same, but it gives you a first impression and opens up your horizon maybe on what that could be like. And what we can also do is check for color contrast. So I want to make sure that the contrast between the background and the foreground is high enough. And if I say high enough, I mean, oh, this is not working. Let me reload that. If I say high enough, I mean 4.5 to 1. So this is to pass the AA level. And I can see here we have a score of 17.5. So this is actually really good. And we're passing all the different levels for all the different sizes, right? I could also check maybe for this gray color. And you see here, it's not as high, but we are still passing, right? So this is sufficient to pass for AA level. So that's really cool. And the last tool I want to show you is DevRel. So this is going to help us visualize if the tab order, so the order in which when you use your keyboard to navigate, if you reached all the interactive elements, if that makes sense and kind of follows the flow in which you would also read through a page. And we can see here, so we're going from left to right and top to bottom. That's really good. And this helps us visualize. And here we see, oh, this is maybe something we want to check out if this is really the order in which we want to go. And again, here we're reaching the links and we're going through all the elements. So again, it's just a tool, right? It's automated. So we need to manually check as well what is behind this order and why is it the way it is. But it gives you a first impression of what you might want to look into. Now, we've seen that Svelte already checks for some of the things, which is really cool, like the required attributes, it does a basic HTML validation, and we can check for a tab index, for example, to help us with the tab order, but it doesn't necessarily cover overarching structures, color contrast, the hierarchies, or the keyboard navigation. And these are things that we can then get external tools to help us improve that and make it even more accessibility first, I guess. So you could say it's not a shortcut, but it's definitely a great start to start thinking about accessibility. And so there is nothing that's holding you back to get started on accessibility today because, well, a little bit is already better than nothing, and we can work this way on making the web more accessible, one website at a time. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. I'd love to connect. Bye.